views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Over the past few years, the Jerome Avenue rezoning has been one of the most intensely debated Bronx projects. In fact, our own records show that we did 3 full programs about what was then called the Jerome Avenue study in March of 2015, exactly 3 years ago. The issue was finally voted on last week, and the city's plan to rezone Jerome Avenue for new housing and development was approved unanimously by the City Council. It's still not without controversy, though, and while tonight's guests are undoubtedly happy with the $189 million they were able to secure for local development and infrastructure improvements, it was hard not to notice the disruptive presence of some Bronxites who are still not happy with the plan. Tonight we will review all of this with the 2 council members whose districts will be directly affected. Please join me in welcoming back to BronxTalk Councilmember Vanessa Gibson. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Gary.
And also Councilmember Fernando Cabrera. Nice to have you with
Thank
us.
you.
Councilmember Gibson, let's start with you. Maybe you could chronicle for us your own evolution when you first heard about this way back, when I said in 2015, I guess it must have been the fall of 2014.
Yes.
And what you thought when you heard it, and get yourself to a point where now the thing has been approved, and I think overall you're pleased with what you've seen.
Yeah, so in 2014, Mayor Bill de Blasio directed the Department of City Planning to look at certain neighborhoods throughout the city of New York that would be able to look at rezoning, potentially increase density, which overall would really impact an expected growth in the city of New York to 9 million people. And one of those neighborhoods was originally called Jerome Cromwell. And in 2014...
Oh, that's right. Before the Jerome Center, it was
yes,
Jerome Cromwell.
Jerome
How did I
Cromwell.
forget? That's
in
right.
late 2014, the Department of City Planning, the Bronx office, came to both Councilmember Cabrera and I, and both community boards 4 or 5, and talked about potentially what this Jerome Cromwell study would look like, looking at, 2 square miles of Jerome corridor, the auto industry, residential, commercial, mixed use and residential density, and what the neighborhood plan could absorb. And at first, I was very new to the city council. It was my first term, didn't really understand zoning and the land use process. But I can honestly say, over 3 years later, I know a lot more than I ever expected. And I really do believe, looking at neighborhoods across the city of New York, and obviously New Yorkers are always in fear of their neighborhoods changing. There's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety of being pushed and priced out, of the rents continuously rising, of the unaffordability of New York City. So both Fernando and I wanted to make sure that this is not a plan just about more residential, but it's a neighborhood plan. It's a community-driven plan, looking at the burden on our schools, mass transit, our parks, our infrastructure, social services. So we truly believe $189 million is a comprehensive plan that is going to make a transformative difference in the West Bronx.
I remember you were here, I think it was in the fall sometime, and we talked about the prospects for getting to the point where we are. Are you satisfied now, essentially, that you got what you wanted? Or do you say, well, we had a compromise here, there, in a couple of places?
I think in every neighborhood plan, there is some give and take. There is a balance you have to achieve. There obviously is a compromise. But there were certain priorities that both Fernando and I were absolute about, and that is achieving 2 brand new schools in school districts 9 and 10, making sure that there were investments in parks. There was deep affordable housing, set-asides for formerly homeless families and seniors. We wanted to make sure that there was funding for local organizations, supporting our auto industry and protecting those businesses. So there were certain things that we were not negotiable on, but we really had to make sure that that was a priority from the beginning to the middle, to the end, and that we achieve that in the final plan.
Councilmember, I'm really going to ask you the same question. When you first heard about it and they said we're looking at your district for a massive undertaking, what were your thoughts then, and how has it evolved to the point where we are now?
Actually, I was excited because many times I had an opportunity to drive through Jerome Avenue, like many people who live in the area. And to be honest with you, I was dissatisfied. I was dissatisfied where our constituents came complaining about the look of Jerome Avenue, the lack of affordable housing in the area, and to be able to have more businesses to come in, like supermarkets in the area, and to change the transportation situation that we have there. And the rezoning for me was very, very exciting. So, and I wanted to make a point of clarification here.
Sure.
It's not 189 million. We're talking about 289 million. We're talking about over $250 million coming into the area. And that gets me very excited because that's transformative.
Where's the discrepancy? I mean, it's been reported. I didn't look at the exact
Well, the schools alone, each school's going to cost about $100 million each to build. So it's very clear. You know, Councilmember Gibson and myself, each one getting a school. We got gymatorium. We got $60 million worth of parks, $60 million in transportation, infrastructure change. I mean, we could go down the list. Security, cameras are going to be all around the corridor. So we are definitely going to have $289 million.
That's a
lot of money.
That's the cost of acquisition. Yeah.
Some of the people in the community have said every time they want to invest in our community, we have to do a give back. In other words, there's a trade-off here as opposed to, gee whiz, every neighborhood deserves new parks, every neighborhood deserves sufficient schools, et cetera, et cetera. Is that frustrating that it had to be part of a process? Because if you went in and said, I need $200 million for parks and schools, you would not have gotten it. Is that frustrating that there has to be this interplay?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we share the frustration that for many years the Bronx have been neglected, but this is our time. And the reality is that a change needed to happen now. We have not had a rezoning take place since the 1960s. And for us not to make a change, you know, when change is necessary and change does not happen, then it's destructive. We will not be moving forward. We will not be progressive about the area. So it was imperative that we did something, and it's bringing about everything that we wanted to have in the area, including deep affordability in the area and 100% affordable housing in the properties that belong in this from the city.
Councilmember, let's just look at some of the past. I mean, many people in the Bronx know that, for example, when they built the filtration plant, there was $200 million slated. It was about 225 when it all washed out, slated for parks. And then maybe 7 years later, it was revealed, well, they really only spent $150 million.
Right.
How do we know that this money will get spent? Is there a monitoring system in place? Does it come to you in your office? Will there be, some sort of community action committee to interact? How is we going to make sure that the money gets spent where it was supposed to get spent?
Yes, so several things. Number one is before we started the first neighborhood rezoning in East New York, the city established a tracking system that's online on the city's website, www.nyc.gov. There is an online tracker that tracks all of the commitments that were agreed in each of the neighborhood rezonings. It gives you a list of the project cost, the timeline, the agency, and everyday New Yorkers can access this website and track each of the neighborhood plans and each of the commitments that were made. Both Fernando and I have made commitments to the administration to work with them and meet on a regular basis to talk about all of the commitments. And also, I will add, within that $189 million and growing, there are 3 task forces that we established. One is on a Southwest Bronx housing to deal with continued housing issues, families that live in distressed buildings that need attention. Public health, which is a priority of both of ours to focus on the health disparities we have, particularly in the West Bronx. And this is very important to both myself and Fernando. Responsible contracting and local hiring. How do local residents buy in and access local jobs and good paying jobs? It was one of the priorities of many of the residents and advocates to make sure that people get local jobs. So how do we hold the administration accountable through the tracking system, through the various meetings that we will have, through our legislative process in the city council. We can always call them back and hold hearings. And then Fernando and I are going to have a very ambitious agenda this spring and this summer to have small roundtable discussions with key stakeholders, organizations, community boards, elected officials to talk about the implementation, because I want people to understand we're not shovel ground ready yet on every single project. We're not disseminating $189 million in one fiscal year. These projects are going to take some time. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they're carried out over the next several years and several budgets, and making sure that these projects come online, on budget, and most importantly, on time.
You had said, were quoted in one of the papers that said it was one of the most difficult and challenging decisions you've ever made. Why? What was difficult and challenging?
Simply,
I think I'm going to ask you a similar question, so hang on.
So I have just completed my first full-year term in the council. Now I'm starting my second term. And I've made a lot of important and very contentious decisions in my life, both from a budget and a legislative perspective. But never in my entire tenure have I looked at an entire neighborhood plan in terms of the housing, the public transportation, the parks, the social services, the healthcare, the economic development, looking at a real neighborhood plan. And I truly believe, while many people are in fear that these types of plans, speed up gentrification and cause people to be pushed and priced out, we are doing our very best to avoid that and to slow that down and disrupt it in its tracks. And I wanted people to understand that through it all, through the challenges, the difficulties, we came to the very best decision on behalf of our district. The challenge is that you recognize that not everyone will be happy. There will be people that still don't believe in the process, don't believe in the system, and there will still be a lot of non-believers out there. So for me, I wanted this to be one of the biggest decisions I made, but also a lasting legacy. We've not seen this major rezoning since the 1960s, and I do want my legacy as a council member in this district to be one of commitment, of investment, and dedication. Did we stand up when we needed to? Did we give our young people a better future than we had? And that's really why it was a difficult decision for me.
Councilmember, you expressed excitement about it, but as it played out, as you heard from constituents concerned about housing, concerned about displacement, did it all of a sudden say, gee whiz, what have I gotten us into at this point?
I didn't have that feeling, but I agree with Councilmember Gibson that there's a learning curve when you do the first one. And as you know, I went to the Kingsbridge Armory one, so the second time around it becomes a little easier. But what happens is you have a lot of special interest groups, you have a lot of ideas, you have a lot of agendas, but I think we did a phenomenal job in working together to stay on mission. And when you're on mission, you have purpose, you come out with the right plan. And I really believe that our two offices, our staff, working together, we were able to bring better ideas even if you only have one council member at work.
Let me pull out a couple of items. One was the idea of non-harassment for tenants. I know it's important to both of you. I believe, if I read it correctly, it was 2 years. What happens after 2 years if property owners see that value grow? Well, all right, we wait 2 years and now we move people out. I mean, are you concerned about those kinds of things?
Look, the first thing that I would say is we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. So we are going to make sure that we don't have, and I know the root of the fruit of the problem that people are feeling anxious about is gentrification. Let's call it for what it is. If you look at the Furman Center report, our areas are one of the only 7 areas in the entire city that we have not experienced gentrification. And that was intentional. That was because of the work that we have performed. And I believe that the check and balances that we have put in place, including the certificate of non-harassment and all of the other legislation that we have passed, that there is enough protection there to make sure that our people who are here will stay, and at the same time making room for those who need affordable housing.
Let's talk with you, Councilmember. Many of the auto businesses, probably the larger percentage are in the southern part of that area of Jerome Avenue. I think it was $1.5 million that was designated for moving expenses and helping them relocate. Frankly, it doesn't seem like a lot of money. I mean, $1.5 million for people who own businesses 2 or 3 of them can eat that up pretty quickly. Are you concerned about displacement? Is it inevitable that somebody's going to be displaced, just from a real point of view?
Right. I think from a realistic, real talk perspective, we recognize that some businesses will be displaced. Our greatest challenge from the beginning in dealing with the auto industry was that we don't have enough protections for commercial tenants like we do for renters and residential businesses and others. The challenge is that many of the property owners see what's happening across the city of New York. And we, through all of the work we've done through surveys and different analyses, we identified 151 auto businesses in the entire corridor. Many of them had a lease of less than 5 years. Some of them were monthly, some of them had 1 and 2 and 3 year leases, but certainly subject to not being renewed if the owner decides not to renew. So 2 of the things that came out of the rezoning in the final plan, $1.5 million, and I emphasize grant money and not loans, because that's a huge difference, available to any business that is displaced, up to $20,000 per business, those that are eligible. So not a business that comes in and says, I was displaced, but businesses that have been there for a certain period of time, helping them with relocation costs, but also the Small Business Services Agency helping the existing businesses today with operation, with compliance. Multi-agencies have oversight over the auto industry, both city and state. So we have put together a workforce of compliance to work with auto businesses that may be out of compliance. They are a vital entity in our district. They are small business workers, employees. Many of them are immigrants from our community. They live in our neighborhoods, and we want to do everything we can to protect them. So moving forward, there are incredible organizations like WAMA that both Fernando and I give local support to, that we're going to make sure that he can access some of this grant money that's available through some of the other pockets of funding, because we also want to make sure that we train our auto workers in the jobs for today and the jobs for tomorrow. I think we should look big picture, long term. Every employee could eventually be an owner. They can be a property owner themselves. We just have to think and give them the opportunity to do so.
You talked a moment ago about jobs. What jobs are out there for people? Among the things in construction projects, and I think it's hurt Bronxites over years, is that many Bronxites are not in the unions, and
Right.
and as a result, the jobs go, the big jobs, the big building jobs go to unions, and so Bronxites end up not getting them. Are there programs, there have been, but they haven't always been successful, to help Bronxites get some of those jobs? And then, of course, what other kinds of jobs do you see helping the community grow and do better?
Yes, there are programs that SBS operates now through their various workforce development centers. There's one in West Farms, Port Morris, and Hunts Point. So in this plan, we were guaranteed, and we did not let go of hiring a Jerome Avenue coordinator that the city is going to hire to work specifically with the Jerome businesses, both auto and non-auto, helping them with local employment opportunities, getting young people ready. I'm very big on formerly incarcerated men and women that come home that don't have a lot of opportunity. Some of the challenges that many people face in terms of education, vocation, and skill set. In addition to that, we're working to build a Jobs First network, which will be a cohort of organizations that are going to work with various CBOs and small business organizations, including SBS, to target young people, to work with our colleges, to work within the networks we have to build a skill set of workforce so that young people have a job. I will also say as well, as far as construction jobs, which are probably the most available when projects come online, in every RFP that's administered by HPD to solicit bidders to build, there's going to be local hiring provisions that we put in the language to make sure that every developer that comes to us has a local hiring plan. That's an important part of this conversation, because many developers come to our districts with jobs that they already have staffed up, and they don't allow us any opportunities. So both construction and post-construction, there could be potential opportunities, the auto industry as well as non-auto and other retail abilities as well.
It seems to me, just from listening and having sat in this seat for all these projects for all these years, one of the missing elements in the past was that commitment from the city. You seem convinced that city agencies, you mentioned HPD, and you mentioned the city was going to set up, a jobs czar, so to speak, that for the first time, the city is not just saying, okay, you can have it, but they're making the commitment to work with you to have it. Do I have that right?
Yes, that is correct. And then I will also say, because we recognize that the city cannot do it all, SBS doesn't have the tools and resources to do pre-construction training, because right now, according to the city's programs, you have to have a high school diploma just to get in the door. Our people don't necessarily have a high school diploma, so what do we do with their skill set where they're not eligible at the beginning? So pre-construction training programs, building up a skill set, is very important. And so the money that we have secured in this plan, thousands of dollars will go to community organizations that will hire young people into these pre-construction jobs.
Councilmember, let's tap into your experience a little bit. You mentioned your experience with the Kingsbridge Armory, for example. When the CBA was agreed to at that time, it was hailed as a revelation, as historic, as the beginning of a whole series of new ways of looking at construction. Of course, that project is not exactly where many people would like it to be. Is this a similar, has it been a similar process, and is there a similar outcome? Are you pleased with this legacy, yes or no, in comparison to the other?
So actually, this is a superior process.
You like this process
Absolutely, much better. When we came down to the CBA, the reality is not legally binding. What we have here is, as Councilmember Gibson pointed out, is that we have total transparency and accountability. And I know the press is going to hold the administration accountable every time that one of those goals were not met on time.
Could you make present company included?
Yes,
in that?
indeed. We would
So
love
you are happier with this process, because the other process, if I remember correctly, was started by local community groups and community energy, and this is coming out of kind of an administrative, legislative body.
But we had community boards 4, 5, 7. We had homeowners. We had a multifaceted level of involvement by the community. So we heard a tremendous amount of input that we were able to filter, prioritize, and be able to achieve those goals. So as you can see, I'm very relaxed. I'm very excited about this process, and I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, it was hard not to notice there are still some people, many people in the Bronx who are not happy about it, and they made their presence clearly felt. Do you have a message for them or a thought for them? Because they undoubtedly, I don't know if I've remembered every question to ask, but they're listening and they're saying, but this or that. What's your thought for those?
I would
You're
say,
going to get the same question.
Yeah, I would say to them, thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about their community. Thank you for their passion. And also to watch and see. Watch and see as we get each of the priorities that we have online come into fruition, and to watch and see that our people are going to get the affordable housing that they need and everything else that has been mentioned here today. And
are you concerned also, share at least some of the concerns about some displacement or people being moved out, or are you real comfortable that this is not part of this plan?
I'm very comfortable that we have all the check and balances to make sure that our people are protected. Are there going to be people that are going to fall through the crack? That is inevitable in any project. I don't care what you do. But I think overall, we're going to see our people protected.
And the same thing for you, message to people.
I agree, and I would say, this is really about the messaging and how you project what has happened. I think this administration has made unprecedented commitments to affordable housing. I was one of the prime sponsors of Right to Counsel, which is well within our districts to protect those that are facing eviction in housing court, giving them access to a free lawyer. Certificate of No Harassment and its implementation starting in community boards 4 and 5. Some of the anti-displacement and other policy work that we've done, we are going to continue to have those conversations, because we are never going to be satisfied with what we have. And I always think there's room to grow. And we know that tenants are living in fear. They're living in the dark. They're undocumented. They're being harassed and exploited by their landlords, the few bad apples that want to take advantage of vulnerable tenants. So my message to anyone in our district is that we have to continue to work together, because this was a very unique opportunity to do something different that had not been done before. Many people don't realize that neighborhoods are changing across the city of New York with or without a zoning. But with a rezoning like we have, we're going to be able to stimulate the type of housing we want. No landlord can build luxury housing or market rate housing in our districts tomorrow and profit. It's just not a reality. So we're going to delineate deep affordability, low income housing, seniors, and other priorities that we have when you talk about affordable housing.
I want to tap into something, and I'll ask you what the council member said. The first thing he said when I asked him that question was, thank you. I don't think there's any question that their passion and their concerns fueled what
Yes.
you ultimately
Yes.
acted on and did, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you will agree with that?
Yes.
Give me, and I'm going to ask you the same thing in a moment. Give me a vision and maybe even a timeline for when people will really see a change and what that change will be in the district. Share your vision, if you would, of what the future of this is
Right.
going to be.
So I'd say the future looks very bright. Over the next few years, you're going to see a brand new Corporal Fisher Park. You're going to see a brand new Grant Park in our district. You're going to see renovations to Bridge Playground and High Bridge. You're going to see major transportation work being done along Jerome Avenue, including cameras, enhanced lightings, and wayfinders, and more things to create a safer, more accessible Jerome Avenue, both east and west corridors. You're going to see publicly owned sites by the city start to come online for future housing. So Corporal Fisher, the second part of it, we're going to achieve 100% affordable housing. You're going to see the beginning of the design of both of our schools in District 9 and District 10. A lot of these things are going to start to come online because we have to go through the process of design, procurement, bid, and construction. But I will say thank you. I agree. We would not have had right to counsel and certificate of no harassment if residents and advocates didn't come forward and did not remain firm in their
demanded it.
values
Let's
demand it.
face
So I
it.
really want to thank them. At the end of the day, while many may not be happy, they cannot deny the level of work that has been done to get us to this place.
And so the same thing for you. I'm sure you share some of the vision that
Absolutely,
she brought.
and-
But what's your vision for your northern part of the
Well,
district?
for the northern part of the district, we're finally going to have the Aqueduct Park walk completely finished.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I've
It's-
been there so often, and it has such potential. To
It
be
is,
lovely.
and we're gonna have
and that's going to be nice. Huh?
And it's going to be nice, $11 million dedicated to that project. Finishing with modern playground
Yes.
park, and we're going to have a brand new park in 1805 Davidson Avenue that the community has been fighting for 10 years, and we finally going to get it on.
Well, you know, when we talked about who's going to monitor it, I'll be here to monitor right along with you. Councilmember Fernando Cabrera, thank you. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, thank you. And of course, thanks to our friends and neighbors in the Bronx. If you have further questions or comments, I imagine people do,
Yes.
on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you can email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page. We'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. If you would like us to forward it to the council members, of course, we will do that. You can check out our archives at BronxNet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk by following the watch menu on the new BronxNet website. Now, next week, we will go to City Island for a check-in about a wonderful reclamation project that will be coming there this spring. And then on April 9th, it will be the debate in the special election for the 32nd Senatorial District. And then on the 16th, it will be the debate for the 80th Assembly District. Thanks to our producer, Helen, and our director, William, to the cast of thousands, to the council members, and of course, mostly to you. Good night.